So with that being the case, what day is the weekly Sabbath? It's no big surprise. It's Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. Now, I already know what a lot of people are saying. They're saying, show me the words Friday and Saturday in the Bible. You're not going to find the words Friday and Saturday in the Bible. That's true. And I'm going to address that argument more specifically later on, because it's really not as strong of an argument as people think it is. But again, we don't find the words Friday or Saturday in the Bible, but that doesn't mean that it can't be proven. Because what we can do is link the Bible and history together to prove that the weekly Sabbath is Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. You see, in the very beginning, the Most High created a 7-day cycle, and that 7-day cycle has never been broken, contrary to what people might say. Now, let's deal with some history concerning the Sabbath day. Now, a lot of lunar Sabbath keepers say that Israelites learned the Friday sundown to Saturday sundown Sabbath while we were in the Babylonian captivity. And they say that we're still doing it that way because of that captivity. Now, that's a historical claim. So the first thing that we have to do is prove that that is not true. Let's go to the New Schaff-Herzog Encyclopedia of Religious Knowledge. This is volume 10, page 135, in regards to the Sabbath day. It says, "It is now held by many that the Sabbath is Babylonian in origin." So that's the claim people are making. Watch this. It says, "Consequently, the Babylonian Sabbath was a day of penance and the middle of the Babylonian month. So the Babylonians kept their Sabbath day once in the middle of the month." That doesn't sound like Friday sundown to Saturday sundown to me. Let's keep going. It says, "It has also been held that the 7th, 14th, 21st, and 28th days of the month, designated as ill-omened, were the Babylonian Sabbaths. But for this argument, there is no evidence." In other words, there's no historical proof that the Babylonians kept their Sabbaths on those particular days. It says, "And it must accordingly be assumed that the 15th day of each month was the Sabbath of the Babylonians." This is important because a lot of people are reading random websites about the Babylonian Sabbath and they're getting the wrong information. We see here that the Babylonians actually kept the Sabbath in the middle of the month on the 15th. It says, "This day was reckoned that of the full moon." So their Sabbath day was based on the full moon. Now watch this. It says, "But since the Hebrew Sabbath was not connected with the full moon and was a day of gladness, not of penance," watch this, "and since the Babylonians had no week of 7 days," here it is, "the assumption that the Hebrews borrowed the Sabbath from the Babylonians lacks all foundation." In other words, it's completely false to say that the Israelites changed the Sabbath day to Friday sundown to Saturday sundown as a result of the Babylonian captivity. That is false. That is a lie, because the Babylonian Sabbath was only once a month on the 15th. So the Babylonian Israelite Friday sundown, Saturday sundown connection is a lie. As we read, that argument lacks all foundation. Now, I'm not promoting this whole encyclopedia. There are some things in this book that are clearly wrong. But the point is, Israelites did not learn the Friday sundown to Saturday sundown Sabbath from the Babylonians. Now, I'm going to take it one step further in case somebody is still unsure about that point. Let's deal with simple logic. If the Sabbath day was changed after the Babylonian captivity, that would mean that the Jews who went back into the land after the Babylonian captivity was keeping the Sabbath day the wrong way. Now, if that's the case, Why did Yahushua keep it on the same day and same time as the other Jews when he came on the scene? We know that the Sabbath day is part of the law and that Yahushua was sinless. So if the Jews was keeping it the wrong way, he would have corrected them. However, we see him keeping it right along with them at the same time. This is Luke chapter 4 and verse 16. It says, "And he," Yahushua, "came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up. And as his custom was," watch this, "he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and stood up for to read." Now, when he went in that synagogue, he wasn't in there by himself. The other Jews was there with him. This verse proves that the Jews in the land were keeping it the right way. Because if they wasn't, Yahushua would not have kept it with them. Now, this is beautiful because we have historical records from the 1st century that show us that Yahushua and the other Jews kept it from Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. But before I go there, I'm clearing all the objections out of the way. Now, a lot of people talk about the Romans and the 8-day week calendar that they used. So they say the Israelites could not have kept the 7th-day Sabbath based on a calendar because the Romans had an 8-day week calendar. But what they don't know is that the Romans also had a 7-day planetary week calendar at the same time. Look at this. This is a book called Sunday in Roman Paganism by Robert Leo Odom. This is page 77. At the top, you see it says, planetary week in the 1st century BC. So this calendar goes back to the 1st century. Down here it says, the Sabine calendar. It says, in 1795 were found the marble fragments of what is known as the Sabine calendar, Fasti Sabini, in a place in central Italy. So these are fragments of an old Roman calendar. It says, these portions represent the months of September and October in the Julian calendar. The experts in this type of archaeological finds have declared them to belong to the reign of Augustus Caesar. Now, the Julian calendar was established in 46 BC, but this calendar was established under the reign of Augustus Caesar. When? It says, and that they were in use between 19 BC and 4 AD. 19 BC is after 46 BC. And more importantly, 19 BC is before the birth of Yahushua, which means that when he came on the scene in the 1st century, this calendar was in use. Now, what's so special about this calendar? Let's go to another book called Famous First in the Ancient and Greek World. This is page 116. The heading says, the first reference to a 7-day week. So we're about to read about an historical reference to a 7-day week calendar used in Rome. It says, an inscription, cylce 1.220, watch this, dated between 19 BC and AD 14, preserving the remains of a Sabine calendar. So this is the same calendar. Watch this. It says, is the earliest known public record of a 7-day week. So this calendar was a 7-day week calendar. And again, the starting point for this calendar is 19 BC. That is before the birth of Yahushua, which means that when he came on the scene, there was a 7-day week calendar in use. So yes, there was an 8-day week calendar, but there was also a 7-day week calendar being used at the same time. Now in this book, they show how the two calendars were used together. It says, the calendar as reproduced by Balsdon 62. Now, let's read the paragraph. It says, where the first column represents the 7 days, so that's the 7-day week, it says, the second column, the nundinum, 8-day cycle in which the 8th day was a market day, it says, the third column represents days on which business could or could not be transacted. Now, let's look at the first column, which is a 7-day week. Notice that you have 7 letters that each represent a day of the week. E, F, G, A, B, C, D. That's 7 days. And then the cycle starts over again back at E. E, F, so forth and so on. That was the 7-day week in Rome. Now, let's look at the middle column, which is an 8-day week. Notice that you have 8 letters that each represent a day of the week. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. That's 8 days. And then the cycle starts over again back at A. So we clearly see that there was 2 calendars being used in Rome during the 1st century, way before the time of Constantine in 321 AD. Now, when you look at these 2 calendars, notice that they don't line up the same. The 7-day week calendar is on a totally different cycle. See, the Israelites in Rome didn't use the 8-day week calendar. We used the 7-day week calendar because the Most High gave us a 7-day week cycle in the very beginning. Now, here's the thing about it. When you do the research, you find out that it was because of Israelite influence that the Romans switched over to our 7-day weekly cycle. They didn't influence us, we influenced them. Josephus spoke about this in his book, and he lived in the 1st century also. This is from the Works of Josephus, Against Apion, Book 2, page 811, Section 40, subsection 282. It says, "Nay, further, the multitude of mankind itself have had a great inclination of a long time to follow our religious observances." Watch this. "For there is not any city of the Grecians, nor any of the barbarians, nor any nation whatsoever, whither our custom of resting on the 7th day have not come." So here we see Josephus testifying to the fact that the 7th day Sabbath influenced all the nations we came in contact with, and even the whole world for that matter. So no, we did not follow the Romans. They actually followed us. So now that we know there was a 7-day week calendar in use in Rome during the 1st century, let's prove that Saturday is in fact the Sabbath day. That's Friday sundown to Saturday sundown, because biblical days start in the evening. Friday sundown is the start of Saturday. Now, historically, we know that the Roman day of Saturn is the same thing as modern day Saturday. That's where the name comes from. We already proved that Yahushua kept the Sabbath day on the same day as the other Jews in the 1st century. So if we can show that the Roman day of Saturn is the same day as the Jews' weekly Sabbath, that proves that Saturday is in fact the Sabbath day. Why? Because Yahushua verified that the Jews was keeping the Sabbath on the right day. So watch this. Now we know historically that the temple was destroyed in 70 AD. 14 years later in 84 AD, a Roman soldier named Julius Frontinus wrote a book called Stratagemmaticon. This book is about using military strategies to defeat your enemy. This is page 98. Let's see what military strategy was used to defeat the Jews. It says, "The deified Vespasian attacked the Jews on the day of Saturn." Watch this. "A day on which it is sinful for them to do any business, and so defeated them." See that? What day is it sinful for Israelites to do business on? The Sabbath day. So the military strategy that Vespasian used was to attack the Jews on the Sabbath day, which the Romans called Saturn Day. This proves that Saturday is the Sabbath day. Here's another testimonial from a Roman historian named Dio Cassius. This is from his book entitled Roman History. This is volume 8, page 271. It says, "Thus was Jerusalem destroyed on the very day of Saturn." Watch this. "The day which even now the Jews reverence most." Again, we know that the Roman day of Saturn is our modern Saturday. So we see historically what day our foreparents kept the Sabbath on. Let's go to page 125 and 127 in this same book. Now this is talking about General Pompey and how he overtook the temple in 65 BC. It says, "But the temple itself, which the other party had occupied, he captured only with difficulty, for it was on high ground and was fortified by a wall of its own." So Pompey had a hard time capturing the temple because it was fortified and we protected it with soldiers. Watch this. It says, "And if they had continued defending it all days alike, he could not have got possession of it." In other words, there were some days that we didn't fight on. Why? It says, "As it was, they made an exception of what are called the days of Saturn." See that? On the days of Saturn, we didn't fight because fighting is a physical activity. It says, "And by doing no work at all on those days, afforded the Romans an opportunity in this interval to batter down the wall." Again, we didn't fight on the Sabbath day, so that left us defenseless. It says, "Thus the defenders, Israelites, were captured on the day of Saturn without making any defense." Now we can clearly see that the Roman day of Saturn, which is modern day Saturday, is in fact the Sabbath day. Josephus recorded this same history in his book. Watch how he tells it. This is War of the Jews, Book 1, Chapter 7, Section 3, subsection 146. It says, "Nor had the Romans succeeded in their endeavors had not Pompey taken notice of the 7th days." See that? Notice that Dio Cassius, being a Roman, called it the days of Saturn, but Josephus, being a Jew, called it the 7th days. It says, "On which the Jews abstained from all sorts of work on a religious account, and raised his bank, but restrained his soldiers from fighting on those days." Again, Pompey wouldn't attack us on normal work days because we would fight back. It says, "For the Jews only acted defensively on Sabbath days." You see? So again, we see Josephus, a Jew who lived during the time of Yahushua, connecting the Israelite Sabbath day with the Roman day of Saturn. It's the same day historically. We didn't fight on the Sabbath days because fighting is a physical activity. The Romans knew that, so they attacked us on our Sabbath day, which they called the day of Saturn. It's the same day. Again, if we were keeping the wrong day, Yahushua would have corrected us, but he didn't. He kept the same day that those Jews kept during that time. Now the Romans knew that we wouldn't fight back on the Sabbath because other people used that same strategy on us hundreds of years before they did. That history is in the Apocrypha. This is 1 Maccabees chapter 2 and verse 31. It says, "Now when it was told the king's servants and the host that was at Jerusalem in the city of David that certain men who had broken the king's commandment were gone down into the secret places in the wilderness," verse 32, "they pursued after them with a great number, and having overtaken them, they camped against them. Watch this. And made war against them on the Sabbath day. So here we see that the officers of Antiochus made war against Israelites on the Sabbath day. Now let's jump down to verse 36. It says, howbeit they answered them not. See, Israel didn't respond to the threats. It says, neither cast they a stone at them, nor stopped the places where they lay hid. Verse 37. But said, let us die all in our innocency. Heaven and earth will testify for us that ye put us to death wrongfully. So we see that Israel refused to fight on the Sabbath day. They said, we'll just die before we violate the Sabbath day. Now let's see what happened. Verse 38. So they rose up against them in battle on the Sabbath, and they slew them with their wives and children and their cattle to the number of 1,000 people. So Israel was slaughtered because they wouldn't fight on the Sabbath day. And that's the same military strategy that the Romans used against us to destroy the temple. They attacked us on the Roman Saturn day, which is modern day Saturday. That's clear. Now, just in case somebody tries to say that the Jews were keeping Saturn day because they were worshiping the pagan god Saturn, let's go back to the book called Roman History by Dio Cassius. This is the bottom of page 127, and it's talking about the Jews. It says, they are distinguished from the rest of mankind in practically every detail of life, and especially by the fact that, watch this, they do not honor any of the usual gods. So here you have a Roman who lived during this time telling us that the Jews did not worship the pagan god Saturn. It says, but show extreme reverence for one particular divinity. Now, who is that divinity? It's the Most High Yahweh. So that argument is false. So brothers that are sincere have to stop using that argument because it's false. Again, Yahweh was keeping the same Sabbath day as the rest of Israel. And if they were keeping it wrong, he would not have kept it with them. I have to keep driving that point home because that point shuts down the whole argument. See again, the Most High established a continual 7-day weekly cycle that has never changed since the beginning of time. People act like that's so hard to believe. Yet they believe that he made the sun, they believe he made the moon and the stars, they believe he made people, but somehow he can't keep a 7-day cycle going. Of course he can. The weekly cycle has never changed. Let's go to Mark 2:27. I went over this in a different video, but I'm going to do it again. This is Mark 2:27. It says, and he said unto them, the Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. What does this verse actually mean? Let's look at it in the Greek, because the Greek is clearer. Mark 2:27, in the Greek, it says, Kai elegant atois, ta sabbaton diaton anthropon egeneto, ka uk ha anthropos diata sabbaton. Now let's focus on the middle section. It says, ta sabbaton diaton anthropon egeneto. The Sabbath was made for the man. Tan anthropon, the man. The Greek says the Sabbath was made for the man. This word anthropon means man, but this word tan right before it is the word the. Why is that important? Because when you place the definite article the before the word man, that implies a specific man. So who was the man that the Sabbath was made for? It was made for the man Adam to have a day of rest. Now, if the Sabbath was made for the man Adam, obviously he kept it on the seventh day when the Most High sanctified it and made it holy. So how did the Sabbath jump from the seventh day when Adam kept it to now being kept based on the new moon? That doesn't make sense. Remember, the Sabbath day was established 3 days after the moon was created. So it doesn't make any sense that it would have changed to a different day later on. Why? Because the 7-day cycle was ordained to be observed throughout all our generations. So that means that the Sabbath day that Yahushua kept is the same Sabbath day that Adam kept. Therefore, it has never changed since the beginning of time. Now, even after all this information, some people will still say time has been lost and we don't know what day it is now because the calendar was changed a bunch of times. So let's deal with the calendar change argument. One of the verses that lunar Sabbath keepers use is Daniel 7:25. Let's read it. It says, "And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High." Here it is. "And think to change times and laws." Now, I agree with this verse. Time has been changed, but the changes in time have not affected the Sabbath day. Watch this. Let's go into some history pertaining to this topic, because people always talk about the changeover from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar, but they don't bring out the actual history of how the Gregorian calendar was established. All you hear is, you're going by the Gregorian calendar. Listen, it's true that the Gregorian calendar is a new calendar, but the adoption of it did not affect the weekly cycle at all. That is what actually matters. Not who made it or how new it is. The question is, did the 7-day weekly cycle change? That is the question. And the answer is no, it did not. So what actually happened? This is what happened. In 1582, Pope Gregory XIII instituted his calendar by jumping ahead 11 days numerically. The 7-day weekly cycle was not affected. The order of Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday was not affected. He only changed the numbers of the days. It was Thursday, October the 4th, and the next day would have been Friday, October the 5th. But instead, it became Friday, October the 15th. So 11 numerical days were added, but the order of the days of the week did not change at all. The weekly cycle stayed exactly the same. Look at this calendar. This is a picture from when the calendar change was made in October in the year of 1582. Notice, it was Thursday, the 4th under the Julian calendar, and the next day it was Friday, the 15th under the Gregorian calendar. 11 numerical days were added, but the weekly cycle did not change. It still went from Thursday to Friday. Now, England waited until 1752 to change over to the Gregorian calendar, and they made the same adjustments by jumping the days ahead numerically. But again, the weekly cycle did not change at all. That is the history of what happened. So, the cycle of days that we are on now is the exact same cycle of days that Yahushua was on under the Julian calendar. So we do know what day it is because we have the historical records. Now, who was the man that actually put the Gregorian calendar together? His name was Aloysius Lilius. When the Catholic Church brought him in to come up with the new calendar, there was various ideals tossed around about how it should be done. But there was one ideal that never came up. Look at this. This is the Catholic Encyclopedia, Volume 9, page 251, under the heading Lilius. Now, this is in reference to the changeover to the Gregorian calendar. It says, "Thus, every imaginable proposition was made." Watch this. Only one ideal was never mentioned. It says, "The abandonment of the 7-day week." You see? So it was never even an option to change the weekly cycle when they switched to the Gregorian calendar. They never even considered it. Now, this is what the people said who actually did it. This is not just somebody repeating something that they heard. This is the history right here. They kept the same weekly cycle. Now, earlier, I said I was going to address the argument when lunar Sabbath keepers say, show me the words Friday and Saturday in the Bible. To be honest, that's a silly argument because there are many modern words that we don't find in the Bible, yet we clearly know what the Bible is saying, even though those words are not there. So that argument really has no weight. See, it's true that the pagan names that are given to the days of the week are not in the Bible. However, those names are just placed on top of the corresponding numbers. For example, they took day 1 and put the name Sunday on it. That doesn't mean it's not day 1. People call it Sunday, but it's still day 1. People call it Thursday, but it's still day 5. People call it Saturday, but it's still day 7. So you don't have to literally see the words Friday and Saturday in the Bible. That's a weak argument, especially when you know the history. Let's go to the Catholic Encyclopedia. This is volume 3, page 740, under the heading Chronology. It says, the days of the week are numbered according to their natural order. Sunday equals 1, Monday equals 2, Tuesday equals 3, Wednesday equals 4, Thursday equals 5, Friday equals 6, Saturday equals 7. That is not hard to understand. It goes on to say, it is to be noted that in the Christian period, meaning since the time of Yahushua, watch this, the order in the days in the week has never been interrupted. So the same day that we call Saturday now is the same day that was Saturday back then, but the Romans called it Saturn Day. The changes to the calendar did not affect the order of the days of the week. It says, thus, when Gregory the 13th reformed the calendar in 1582, Thursday, the 4th of October, was followed by Friday, the 15th of October. So we see the same consistent history being taught. So again, we do know what day it is because we have the historical records to prove it. Now here's the thing. I don't care about the Gregorian calendar, but that's not the point. The point is trying to calculate the weekly Sabbath based on the new moon will never work because the Sabbath comes around consistently every 7 days. But the new moon doesn't operate on a perfect 7-day cycle. You will never get a continuous 6-day work, 1-day rest cycle using the new moon. You will always need to add 1 or 2 extra days at the end of every month to make it work. So again, the whole, you're using the Gregorian calendar. That argument doesn't actually mean anything when you understand and know the history. Now, let me explain something that needs to be understood. The days of the week do not run parallel with the days of the month. For example, the first day of the month is based on the new moon. That is correct, because the new moon determines a new biblical month. So we need to know when the new moon is because the yearly feast days are linked to the moon. Watch. This is Ecclesiasticus 43 and verse 7. It says, from the moon is the sign of feast. You see? So all the feast days are linked to the moon. However, the weekly Sabbath is not linked to the moon. See, the weekly cycle and the monthly cycle are 2 different cycles. Even though New Moon Day is the first day of a biblical month, the new moon can come in on any day of the week. Because the weekly cycle is a continuous 7-day cycle that is not affected by the moon or anything else. The Most High established that in the very beginning. That's why 3 days had already passed before the moon was even made. So the days of the week are separate from the days of a biblical month. Here's an example. If the new moon comes in on the third day of the week, the next day is not the second day of the week. It's the fourth day of the week. Why? Because the 7-day cycle has to complete itself. There is always 7 days in a week. In fact, the word week means 7. So there must be a completion of 7 days, over and over and over again. The moon does not change that pattern. There is no scripture in the whole Bible that justifies a full 7-day week not being completed. So the new moon does not cut short 1 week and start a brand new week over, because there must be a completion of the full 7-day week cycle. Now, let's go into this book called The Works of Philo. Who was Philo? Philo of Alexandria, also called Philo Judaeus, was a Hellenistic Jew who lived in Alexandria, in the Roman province of Egypt. He was born in 25 BC and he died in 50 AD. Philo was a Jew who lived in the 1st century during the time of Yahushua. He is a credible witness as to when and how the Sabbath was kept. Why? Because he was there and he wrote about it. Now let's go to the section of this book called On the Creation. This is page 18, section 128, and it's talking about the number 7 and the Sabbath day. It says, "These things and more are said in a philosophical spirit about the number 7, on account of which it has received the highest honors in the highest nature. And it is honored by those of the highest reputation among both Greeks and barbarians, who devote themselves to mathematical sciences." Watch this. It says, "It was also greatly honored by Moses, a man much attached to excellence of all sorts, who described its beauty on the most holy pillars of the law, and wrote it in the hearts of all those who were subject to him." Watch this. "Commanding them at the end of each period of 6 days to keep the 7th holy." Notice it says at the end of each period of 6 days, meaning there always has to be a consecutive period of 6 days in between each Sabbath day. The 7-day cycle cannot be broken because the Most High established that in the beginning. You can't throw a transitional day in the mix because that changes the whole cycle. As we saw earlier, if you follow the lunar Sabbath, the holy 7-day cycle is broken at the end of every month. If you count the 2 transitional days as work days, that would give you a 2-day work week. And that's just ridiculous. You must have 6 days between each Sabbath day. Thus saith the Most High Yahweh. And if anybody says anything different, then you're going directly against the Most High himself. This is Leviticus 23 verse 3. It says, "6 days shall work be done, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of rest." That's plain. There must be 6 days between each Sabbath day. Not 1 day, not 2 days, not 4 days, 5 days. There must be 6 days between each Sabbath day. Now, if you say something different, you're going against the Most High's word. It's really that simple. Now, let's get one more passage from this book. This section is called The Second Festival. This is page 575, section 65. It says, "It is forbidden also on this day to kindle a fire, as being the beginning and seed of all the business of life." So we know this is talking about the Sabbath day. Now let's jump down to this section. It says, "Not only that those who were free should abstain from all works on the 7th day, but also that their servants and handmaids should have a respite from their task." Watch this. proclaiming a day of freedom to them also, here it is, after every space of 6 days. Again, notice the emphasis is after every space of 6 days. So there cannot be any transitional days that don't count as days. The holy 7-day cycle cannot be broken. The Most High established it in the very beginning, and it has never changed. So we see that to be true according to the Bible and historically. Now, let's look at a series of quotes from people who are actually qualified to speak on this subject based on their expertise. This first quote goes back to March 12, 1932. This is a quote from Dr. James Robertson, who was the director of the U.S. Naval Observatory Department in Washington, D.C. He was asked about the possible changes that occurred to the weekly cycle due to all the calendar changes. This is what he said. As to question 1, I can only state that in connection with the proposed simplification of the calendar, we have had occasion to investigate the results of the works of specialists in chronology. Watch this. And we have never found one of them that has ever had the slightest doubt the continuity of the weekly cycle since long before the Christian era. As to question 2, there has been no change in our calendar in past centuries that has affected in any way the cycle of the week. So here we have the director of the U.S. Naval Observatory Department attesting to the fact that no calendar changes have ever affected the 7-day weekly cycle. Here's another quote by Dr. Charles Totten, who was the professor of astronomy at Yale University. He wrote a book called Joshua's Long Day and the Tao of Ahaz. This is page 78. It says, in spite of all our dickerings with the calendar, it is patent that the human race never lost the septenary, that means 7-day, sequence of weekdays, and that the Sabbath of these latter times comes down to us from Adam through the ages without a single lapse. Let's get one more. Here's a quote by Professor Demetrios Egenides, who was the director of the Observatory of Athens. It says, the continuity of the week has crossed the centuries and all known calendars still intact. You see? The reason the weekly cycle was never broken is because the Most High didn't allow it to be broken. Why? So that we can properly keep the Sabbath day the right way. Now, with everything we looked at, it should be clear that the Sabbath day is Saturday, which is Friday sundown to Saturday sundown, because again, a biblical day starts in the evening when the sun goes down. Let me show you that. This is Leviticus 23 and 27. It says, also on the 10th day of the 7th month, there shall be a day of atonement. It shall be an holy convocation unto you, and ye shall afflict your souls and offer an offering made by fire unto Yahweh. So notice it says that the Day of Atonement starts on the 10th day. Now let's go down to verse 32. This is still talking about the Day of Atonement, which is on the 10th day. It says, it shall be unto you a Sabbath of rest, and ye shall afflict your souls. Watch this. In the 9th day of the month at even, from even unto even shall ye celebrate your Sabbath. Now, why does this verse say that the Day of Atonement starts on the 9th day at even, but verse 27 says it starts on the 10th day? Because the 9th day at evening is the start of the 10th day. Biblical days start at evening time, not at nighttime and not in the morning. Biblical days start at evening time when the sun goes down. Watch. This is Deuteronomy 16:6. It says, "But at the place which Yahweh thy God shall choose to place his name in, there thou shalt sacrifice the Passover at even." So we see that the Passover is sacrificed at evening time. When is evening time? It says, "At the going down of the sun, at the season that thou camest forth out of Egypt." So evening time is when the sun goes down, which is a brand new day. Watch. Let's go to Luke chapter 13 and verse 10. It says, "And he, Yahushua, was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath." Verse 11, "And behold, there was a woman which had a spirit of infirmity 18 years, and was bowed together, and could in no wise lift up herself." So Yahushua was out teaching on the Sabbath day, and he saw this woman that was sick. Now let's go down to verse 13. It says, "And he laid his hands on her, and immediately she was made straight, and glorified the Most High." Now watch this, verse 14. "And the ruler of the synagogue answered with indignation." Watch this. "Because that Yahushua had healed on the Sabbath day." So the rulers had a problem with Yahushua healing people on the Sabbath day. What else did the ruler say? It says, "And said unto the people, there are 6 days in which men ought to work. In them therefore come and be healed, and not on the Sabbath day." So we see that the rulers in Israel were teaching the people not to come to be healed on the Sabbath day. Remember that point. Now let's go to Luke 4:16. It says, "And he, Yahushua, came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, and as his custom was," watch this, "he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day, and stood up for to read." So here we see Yahushua again in the synagogue on the Sabbath day. Let's jump down to verse 38. It says, "And he arose out of the synagogue." So Yahushua left the synagogue. Again, this was the Sabbath day. It says, "And entered into Simon's house. And Simon's wife's mother was taken with a great fever, and they besought him for her." So this is Simon Peter, and his wife's mother was sick on the Sabbath day. Now let's pick this story up at the same place in Matthew chapter 8 and verse 14. It says, "And when Yahushua was come into Peter's house, he saw his wife's mother laid and sick of a fever." Verse 15, "And he touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she arose and ministered unto him." So Yahushua healed her on the Sabbath day. But watch this. Verse 16, "When the even was come," when evening time came, it says, "they brought unto him many that were possessed with devils, and he cast out the spirits with his word, and healed all that were sick." Now, why did the people wait until the evening time to come to Yahushua to get healed? Because the Pharisees was teaching the people not to go get healed on the Sabbath day, like we read in Luke chapter 13. So, if the people waited until the evening time to come to Yahushua for healing, what does that show us? It shows us that a new day starts at evening time. The people waited until the evening time because the Sabbath day was over at that point and a new day had started. See, when the sun goes down at evening, that starts a new day. Now let's read this same verse in Mark. Watch this. This is Mark 1 and 32. It says, "And at even," watch this, "when the sun did set," or when the sun went down, it says, "they brought unto him all that were diseased, and them that were possessed with devils." See that? When the sun sets, or when the sun goes down, that is a new day. So on Friday evening, When the sun goes down, that is the start of Saturday. That's why we keep the Sabbath from Friday sundown to Saturday sundown, because that is the weekly seventh-day Sabbath. Let me make one more important point. When the Most High was teaching Israel how to keep the weekly Sabbath in the wilderness, he didn't use the moon. He used manna to teach them a 7-day cycle. He gave them manna each day for the first 5 days and a double portion of manna on the 6th day. Then they knew that the next day was the Sabbath day. He did that cycle over and over again so that they understood the 7-day cycle. Not one time did he tell them to look at the moon and use the moon as a guide for the 7th day. You won't find that in the Bible. He taught them the weekly Sabbath using manna, not the moon. Now, there's so much more I could go into, both biblically and historically. But at this point, if somebody still disagrees, they're going to disagree no matter what I say. Now, this is a long video with a lot of information in it. And I expect a lot of my brothers who are lunar Sabbath keepers to have problems with what I'm saying. But here's the thing. If you don't come with no scriptures and you just come with slander, I'm going to ignore you and erase your comment. I'm telling you straight up, because I know how Israel is. I'm not here for the name calling and all the scare tactics. Deal with the scriptures, deal with credible history, and let's establish the truth. But if you come with your name calling and your threats, I'm going to erase your comments and block you. Plain and simple. I have no problem blocking people, because this is about the truth and being men, not being emotional because you don't have no scriptures to support your doctrine. Again, I'm cool with a lot of brothers who follow the lunar Sabbath, but the truth is the truth, and we should be able to discuss these things as men in the scriptures and dealing with history on this particular subject without the name calling and the childish behavior. I'm sick of us talking about we the greatest people on the face of the earth, and we can't even conduct ourselves in a mature manner when it comes to a disagreement. Overly emotional and acting like children. We got to do better than that. So I hope somebody got some understanding from this video. And with that, I say, Shalom.